Welcome to Compact Warfare from compactwarfare.com, the show where we explore key moments from the history of conflict, from ancient battlefields to modern warfare. This is episode 39, the 7 Years' War. The 7 Years' War was a global conflict that changed the face of 18th century politics and colonial empires. Fought between 1756 and 1763, it involved most of the major powers of the time, including Britain, France, Spain, Austria, and Prussia. This war was unique not just for its sheer scale, but for the way it stretched across continents, from the fields of Europe to the forests of North America, the coastlines of West Africa, the jungles of India, and the high seas. It is often described as the first true world war. The origins of the war lay in unresolved disputes from previous conflicts, particularly the War of the Austrian Succession. Tensions simmered over territorial claims in Europe, especially between Prussia and Austria. In North America, British and French colonists were clashing over control of the Ohio River Valley, a rich and strategic area. The diplomatic alliances were reshuffled in the lead-up to war. Britain allied with Prussia, and France joined forces with Austria and Russia. This realignment of traditional partnerships, known as the diplomatic revolution, shocked many observers and created a highly volatile political climate across Europe. In Europe, the war erupted with Prussia's preemptive strike into Saxony, initiating a conflict that saw the small but militarily disciplined Prussian army take on a coalition of Austria, France, Russia, and Sweden. Frederick the Great, the Prussian king, quickly established his reputation as a tactical genius. At the battles of Rossbach and Leuthen in 1757, he used speed, deception, and precision to defeat far larger enemy forces. However, these victories came at great cost. Prussia was surrounded on all sides, and its survival depended on maintaining momentum and receiving support from Britain, which provided funds but no troops for the continental theatre. Frederick's situation grew dire as Russian forces advanced and occupied East Prussia and even marched into Berlin in 1760. The tide only turned with the sudden death of Russia's Empress Elizabeth in 1762. Her successor, Peter III, was an admirer of Frederick and withdrew Russian troops from the war, even signing a peace treaty. This dramatic shift, sometimes called the miracle of the House of Brandenburg, saved Prussia from destruction and allowed it to survive against the odds. While the European war raged, Britain focused on maritime supremacy and expanding its colonial empire. British naval dominance was critical to its success. The Royal Navy, under commanders like Admiral Edward Hawke, scored major victories, including the decisive Battle of Quiberon Bay in 1759, which shattered French naval power and prevented an invasion of Britain. With the seas under British control, attention turned to the empire's colonial ambitions. In India, the British East India Company fought to oust French influence and gain control over key territories. Under the leadership of Robert Clive, British forces defeated the Nawab of Bengal and his French allies at the Battle of Plassey in 1757. This battle marked a turning point, as it allowed the British to exert significant control over Indian politics and trade, setting the stage for nearly 2 centuries of British rule in the subcontinent. In North America, the conflict is known as the French and Indian War. It began with clashes in the Ohio River Valley and escalated into a full-scale conflict. British generals like Edward Braddock initially suffered defeats, but leadership improved with the rise of figures like William Pitt the Elder, who directed British strategy from London. Pitt invested heavily in colonial forces and naval operations, resulting in major victories. The capture of Louisbourg in 1758, Quebec in 1759, and Montreal in 1760 effectively ended French power in Canada. The Battle of the Plains of Abraham, in which General James Wolfe and French commander Montcalm were both killed, became one of the war's defining moments. The Caribbean was another critical front. British forces captured the French islands of Guadeloupe and Martinique, though these would be returned after the war in the interest of European balance. These islands were economically significant, as sugar plantations were among the most profitable enterprises of the time. In West Africa, both France and Britain targeted each other's trading posts, particularly those connected to the transatlantic slave trade. Though often overlooked, this theatre was important for the control of commercial routes and colonial wealth. In 1762, Spain entered the war on France's side, hoping to defend its own empire from British aggression. However, this move backfired. British forces quickly captured Havana in Cuba and Manila in the Philippines. These conquests demonstrated the far-reaching power of Britain's navy and served as bargaining chips during peace negotiations. The Treaty of Paris in 1763 ended the war and redrew the map of the world. France ceded Canada and all its territories east of the Mississippi River to Britain. Spain handed over Florida to Britain in exchange for the return of Havana. France compensated Spain with the Louisiana Territory west of the Mississippi. France retained only a few small Caribbean islands and some trading posts in India and Africa. Britain emerged as the world's preeminent colonial power, with vast new territories and unmatched naval dominance. However, victory came at a cost. The war had drained the British treasury, and the national debt had ballooned. In an effort to recoup these losses, Britain introduced new taxes on its American colonies, including the Stamp Act and the Townshend Acts. These measures were deeply unpopular and ignited a chain reaction of resistance, eventually culminating in the American Revolutionary War. Ironically, the very war that gave Britain its global empire also sowed the seeds for its first major imperial loss. France, humiliated by its losses, underwent a period of soul-searching and reform. Its defeat exposed weaknesses in military organization, colonial administration, and finance. Many of the grievances that would later explode into the French Revolution can trace their origins to the failures of the 7 Years' War. Austria, though unable to reclaim Silesia from Prussia, remained a major power but was forced to reconsider its military and diplomatic strategies. Prussia, on the other hand, emerged from the war with its prestige significantly enhanced. Frederick the Great had proven that a smaller, highly disciplined army could defeat larger coalitions. Prussia's rise would reshape European politics for the next century, eventually leading to the unification of Germany under Prussian leadership. In India, the war cemented British dominance. The decline of French influence allowed the East India Company to expand its territory and influence with little resistance. This period marked the beginning of British imperial control over the Indian subcontinent, which would last until the 20th century. The 7 Years' War also had a profound cultural and intellectual impact. The Enlightenment thinkers of the time observed the conflict closely, noting the scale of the war and its effects on society and governance. The war challenged traditional ideas of statecraft and diplomacy, prompting many to advocate for reforms in military organization and international relations. Ultimately, the 7 Years' War was not just a struggle for territory. It was a contest of ideologies, strategies, and global ambitions. It demonstrated the interconnectedness of distant regions and the global reach of imperial rivalries. The war reshaped continents, destroyed empires, elevated new powers, and altered the course of history. In its wake, the world stepped into a new era, where global conflict would increasingly define the fate of nations. I hope you enjoyed that episode of Compact Warfare from compactwarfare.com. If you did, please leave a review wherever you get your podcasts. And while you're there, don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss any future episodes. Thanks for listening, and I'll see you next time.